here. We're reading Leviticus chapter 13, verses 29 through 59, and we are continuing to talk about a terrible skin disease called leprosy. Remember, here in Leviticus, we're not necessarily talking about what we think of as leprosy. We're talking about any type of skin disease. But here's the thing: when we're talking about leprosy, we have a much bigger problem than leprosy. You see, you and I, every single human being, we have the problem of sin. We have wicked hearts. We have a much bigger problem than leprosy. And we'll see, as we saw in yesterday's reading, as we'll see today, a big chunk of reading, and we'll see in chapter 14, the laborious and detailed effort they went through to identify leprosy and skin diseases and whether or not it was spreadable. That attention needs to be given also to our sinful nature that corrupts in a greater way. And actually, leprosy, in a sense, becomes a picture of what sin does. You see, leprosy made a person unclean. It made them unable to participate in holy worship. They had to go through a cleansing period. They had to be, in leprosy's case, be totally cleared from it in order for them to actually experience holy temple worship. Well, folks, it's not a skin disease that is going to make you unable to experience holy worship. This was a picture in Old Testament times of what sin will do to us. So you and I got a big problem, and we're going to think about how leprosy is a picture of sin as we read our reading today, because you and I, we got a big problem, and we've got to get serious about it and realize the damage that it does, and don't play around with sin and really crucify our flesh and really root out all those hidden evils and desires that are within our own hearts. So when a man or woman has a disease on the head, so we're talking about now leprosy in different places. We're going to talk about skin disease on the head at this point, or the beard, particularly probably the chin, the priest shall examine the disease. I have that as an example for us to follow, in the sense of that we should examine our own hearts. When we approach the Lord, we should say, Lord, check our hearts to see if there's any unrighteous way within us. And of course, there is an unrighteous way. We should expect that our great high priest, Jesus Christ, is able to examine our hearts, and we should expect that he will find something that needs to be changed. Folks, we will never be perfect on this side of eternity. If you ever get to a point where you think like, man, I've got it made, oh, I am such a good person, you have set yourself up for ultimate failure, because you are blind, and ultimately what the Bible would say is that you are a fool. You have things to change. All of us do. So the priest shall examine the disease. So examine your heart. And if it appears deeper than the skin, well, deeper than the skin, isn't that just a wonderful terrible, I should say, picture of sin? Sin is far deeper than the skin. It goes to our hearts. It goes to our soul. And as Jesus says, it's actually what comes out of the heart. That's what defiles a person, not to eat with unwashed hands or do these ceremonially impure items. We have something far deeper than the skin. We have sin in our hearts. So we'll continue. And the hair in it is yellow and thin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. Okay, clear. He's got a skin disease that's contagious. He is unclean. He's not able to participate in holy worship. He's actually not able, in this instance, to even live inside the tent. He's got to live outside the camp alone, not by himself necessarily. He can live with other unclean people, but he's not allowed to live within the camp. It is an itch, a leprous disease of the head or beard. And if the priest examines the itching disease and it appears no deeper than the skin and there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut up the person with the itching disease for 7 days. As we saw in the previous ones, there's a time of making sure, is this really a skin disease that is contagious? And on the 7th day, the priest shall examine the disease. If the itch is not spread and there is no yellow hair and the itch appears to be no deeper than the skin, again, you see that quote, no deeper than the skin, then he shall shave himself. But the itch he shall not shave, and the priest shall shut up the person with the itching disease for another 7 days. Make it a little bit clearer to see if it has spread or not. And on the 7th day, the priest shall examine the itch, and the itch is not spread in the skin. It appears to be no deeper than the skin. Yet again, that clarification, our sin problem goes far deeper than the skin. Then the priest shall pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the itch spreads in the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall examine him. And if the itch has spread in the skin, the priest need not seek for the yellow hair. He's unclean. It's clear. He's got a skin disease that is contagious. But if in his eyes, so if the priest says, okay, it's unchanged, black hair has grown in it, the itch is healed, and he is what? Clean, because it's only skin deep. It doesn't go deeper than the skin. It's not contagious. And then the priest shall pronounce him clean. And isn't it great that our great high priest pronounces us clean? He pronounces sinless, not because we are sinless, but because Jesus' righteousness is applied to our account. When a man or woman has spots on skin of the body, white spots, the priest shall look, and if the spots on the skin of the body are of dull white, it is leukoderma, which is broken out in the skin. Leukoderma being white, splotchy patches, so more of a cosmetic issue, not a spreadable disease. He is clean. So you see that the looks isn't what makes someone unclean. It's this connection to this contagious skin disease. If a man's hair falls out from his head, he is bald. So you don't need to worry. And I'm sure I'm going to make my way to the club at some day. But if your hair falls out, you're not unclean. You're just bald. He is clean. And if a man's hair falls out from his forehead, he has baldness of the forehead. He is clean. But if there is on the bald head or the bald forehead a wettish right disease area, it is a leprous disease breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall examine him, and if the disease swelling is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, like the appearance of a leprous disease in the skin of the body, he's a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest must pronounce him unclean. His disease is on his head. Again, remember the minute detail that they are taking to examine the body for this skin disease. We should take the same effort, the same work to examine our sinful hearts. And we should always expect that there will be sin that will pop up. The leprous person who has the disease shall wear torn clothes and let the hair of his head hang loose. They're supposed to be in a state of mourning. Do you mourn over your sin and your sinful heart? Or do you make excuses for it? If we're honest, we usually sin and then we cover up the sin with making excuses. Prideful people we are. So we should be in a state of mourning for our sin. And he shall cover his upper lip and cry out, unclean, unclean. Is that the attitude we have with the far bigger problem of sin than of leprosy? Crying out, unclean, unclean, realizing that you are even contaminating other people with your sinful behavior and hurting people. He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall live alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Can't live inside the community. He's got to live outside it. He does live alone in the sense of he can't live with clean people, but he can live with other unclean people. But he cannot contaminate the camp, which then would potentially contaminate the sanctuary. These go into the unclean area. Nothing unclean can participate in holy temple worship. When there's a case of leprous disease in a garment. So we've moved from talking about something on the skin, and now we're talking about a mold type material, whether a woolen or a linen garment in warp or woof of linen or wool, or in a skin or anything made of skin. If the disease is greenish or reddish in the garment or in the skin or in the warp of the woof or in any article made of skin, it is a case of leprous disease, and it shall be shown to the priest. Again, taking it to the priest, looking at it. Is this defiled? Is this going to cause me trouble? We should do the same thing with our hearts and our attitudes and actions that we do. Are you going places you shouldn't be? Are you exposing yourself to things that are really going to mess with you and tempt you? Take it to Jesus and really think that through. Is this something I should be doing? And the priest shall examine the disease and shut up that which has the disease for 7 days. Then he shall examine the disease on the 7th day. If the disease has spread in the garment, in the warp, or the woof, or in the skin, whatever be the use of the skin, the disease is a persistent leprous disease. It's a good description of sin. It's persistent. Can only be washed by the blood of Christ. And he shall burn the garment. You see the radicalness of separation from something that is going to cause the body to be unclean, radical separation from something that should cause your soul in particular temptation, or the whoop, or the wolf, or the wool, or linen, or any article made of skin of this disease. For it is a what? Persistent leprous disease. It shall be burned in the fire. You probably have heard of or know of folks that are alcoholics or have been alcoholics, and they are just addicted to alcohol, and they have made an absolute vow that they will never come near the stuff because they know if they just smell it, if they see it, they'll drink it, and when they get one little drop on their tongue, they are in a ravenous appetite for it, and then they go in ridiculous areas. And so it's not just related to alcohol. It could be any sort of addictive behavior. And there's probably some addictive behavior you have too. And you've got to make sure you burn it in the fire. Get rid of it. And if the priest examines, we still got a lot of reading to do. If the priest examines, and if the disease is not spread in the garment, in the warp, or the wolf, or in any article made of skin, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing which is the disease. So it's not spreading, but it seems it definitely has a spot on it. Then we're going to wash it. He shall shut it up for another 7 days, seeing if it's going to spread, just like we've done with the body. And the priest shall examine the diseased thing after it has been washed. And if the appearance of the diseased area is not changed, or the disease is not spread, it is unclean. You shall burn it in the fire, whether the rot is on the back or on the front. So because the whole idea is that if it doesn't have reason to grow, it should it should actually go away if it's not a live mold or whatnot. But if the priest examines, and if the diseased area has faded after it has been washed, he shall tear it out of the garment or the skin or the warp or the wolf. You're able to keep it. You can tear it out. Then if it appears again in the garment, in the warp or the wolf, or any article of skin that is spreading, get rid of it. You shall burn with fire whatever has disease. I think I may burn it to begin with, just to not even go through this process. But garments were a lot more difficult to come a hold of than they are today. But the garment or the warp or the wolf or any article made of skin from which the disease departs when you have washed it shall be washed a second time and be what? Clean. This is the law. For a case of leprous disease in a garment of wool or linen, we have a far bigger problem than mold or leprosy or skin disease or whatnot. We have the problem of the sinful heart, either in the warp or the wolf or in any article made of skin, to determine whether it is clean or unclean. I pray that has been a blessing to you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.